Welcome to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand with Nicholas Kuhne. Well, howdy everyone. You probably wondered how you found yourself on this marvelous podcast, but hopefully with this interview you're going to see that it is worthwhile. So we've got Trey Robinson, a growth junkie, founder of Story Amplify, a full-service digital agency focusing on financial service markets. He's a startup advisor, consultant, etc., where he's designed and implemented growth programs for thousands of financial advisors. And as you can see, hails from the Lone Star State. So, Trey, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, we've got a couple of hurdles we're going to jump over today. So, you mentioned to me that you're a growth junkie, and obviously you've dealt with thousands and thousands of customers and people in your career in the financial services market. Different countries use different terms for that. So I want to talk a little bit about some growth strategies for startups and businesses. But first, let's go a little bit into your background. Why should people believe anything that comes out of Trey's mouth when it comes to selling as a financial services person that you're going to help them do the job?
Well, I'm a sixth generation Texan, and so if you know anything about us Texans, we're pretty straight shooters. So first and foremost, nothing's going to come out of my mouth that isn't based on real world experience. It's not backed by a number of use cases. The second thing I'll tell you is there's a lot of marketing people out in the world that are they like marketing. I like business growth, and so ultimately the way we're going to measure results when we start talking about programs and support is, are we ringing the cash register? Is it flowing to the bottom line? And so when I say growth junkie, I'm talking about selling products. I'm talking about moving real dollars, and so we can talk a lot about that experience.
So it's something that I think a lot of marketers or advertising agencies or social media agencies forget, is that you've got to get that cash register or you've got to get that credit card or online sale in order to drive business. It's not just creative, it's not just pretty pictures, etc. And I've seen a lot of companies focusing too much on being smart and funny and focusing too much on the creative versus, is this actually going to get a sale? And this will go into another subject, which is the importance of CRM. So we talk about marketing. A lot of people have their Rolodexes with names and numbers, and they've got to generate sales out of these folks. In your experience in the financial services industry, how important is CRM and managing this properly?
I mean, it's super important. It doesn't matter if you're doing B2B, where you're trying to sell one-to-one and you're using your contacts, or you're doing B2C where you're trying to sign up thousands of individual investors for some product, and in some cases hundreds of thousands of individual investors for some product. Your CRM takes a role in both of those funnels. The B2B world, it might be more personal, it might be more tracking notes, it might be some automated follow-up. In the B2C world, it's definitely on the automation. So if the marketing creates a lead, we put that lead in the CRM. That lead needs to be nurtured, spoken to, cultivated until they're ready to hand off to a live person, your human capital, a sales person, or step straight into a buying process on the web. That middle part of the B2C funnel is 100% driven by the CRM.
I think a lot of people who've listened or have listened to the show have probably watched Wolf of Wall Street. Now, that's the kind of vibe I think when I think financial services, and we see rooms of people shouting, making noise, etc. Is that your experience? Is there some kind of reality to that movie in your life?
In my life. Now, I love the movie myself, whether it's DiCaprio or my fellow Texan, McConaughey. I love the actors. To me, it's entertaining. But I grew up at USAA and Charles Schwab, and those brands are built on trying to help people. USAA is military focused here in the U.S. Charles Schwab is bringing Wall Street to Main Street, and Chuck himself, spent a lot of time figuring out how to push down commissions, how to make Wall Street more accessible in his, probably now 40-year career. And so I grew up on the other side of the house, which is how do we take big tech, how do we take sophisticated products and make them easier to use, easier to consume, so that mainstream has access to everything. My first role was actually in the trading business, and that's when they were changing the laws that you could place your own trades. And right, for the first time, that was late 90s, people would actually trade for themselves as to having to go through some type of intermediary. So that democratization, as we would call it, of Wall Street has been really, all the way through my career.
So not that exciting. It's about just getting that register going and giving people value. A lot of folks have smaller businesses and perhaps have tens or hundreds, maybe 1,000 customers in their lifetime of their business. You've dealt with companies that are, and you've just mentioned, tens of thousands of agents and consultants and so on. What have you learned from that experience of trying to engage thousands of people versus going down into reaching out to 10 and 50 and 100 people?
Yeah, great question. So what we do at the agency today is we spend a lot of time with individual localized financial advisors. And, they've got somewhere between 200 and 500 clients at most, right? And so their business is very hand-to-hand. It's very shaking hands. It's very referral-based. But the problem in today's digital world is that when someone starts to talk about a referral or a business that they like, the next thing that the other person does is they go check out their digital footprint. What's their website like? What are their social media feeds? What are they involved in? Who do they know that I know if you're in a small town? So it's really important that we bring the digital best practices from the big companies down to the small companies. Make sure that their digital footprint is just as accurate and compelling as the big guys, because even in a referral word of business, they've still got to have some type of digital footprint.
And I saw one very exciting service that you offer, which is the internal activation. So maybe let's talk to people about why internal activations are so important for financial services businesses.
So there's two ways to think about internal activation. You can think about activating your current customers, or you can think about activating your employees, right? And so depending on which way you want to take that question, on the employee side, it's really important in a small business that when you put something up on a billboard or on the back wall of the Little League stadium, and then someone calls, that your receptionist, your office manager knows what that was. They know how to carry that message forward. They understand what you're saying in public, and so there's not this disconnect, and a lot of times that disconnect creates loss of business between your employees and maybe what's happening out in your advertising. On the client side, when you're talking about internal activation, it's not enough just to get the customer in the door and sell them their first product. What are the other needs they have? How do you continue to grow that relationship? How does that relationship grow and mature over time? And so we talk a lot about nurturing, cross-selling, upselling your current clients. And so depending on which side we're thinking about activation, I think both are important. They're different kind of tactics that we use to bring those to life.
Yeah, that internal selling side is so key, especially when working in some of these larger businesses. Making sure that everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet is sometimes forgotten. That's one. Number two, being able to sell what you're selling internally so that people believe in it and are able to sell it is a absolutely critical aspect of any business. Financial services, I reckon, has quite a high turnover of staff. So this kind of internal activations is quite important for businesses to codify or have somewhere on a digital platform. And I suppose this is where CRM comes back in again. Those lists of people, how you've spoken, when you've spoken to them, how you've spoken to them, what their needs are, needs to carry through to whatever new team is joining the company.
Oh, absolutely. And if your client is coming in for their annual review, if you're a financial advisor and you haven't talked to them in 90 days, 180 days, what was that last conversation? How do I refresh myself? How does my staff refresh themselves on what the client's most important goals are? So when they walk in the door, we're talking about things that are important to the client. And ultimately, when they feel cared for, when their needs are met, that's when they stay around. That's when they refer, right? That's when they might bring you additional business. But to your point, it all goes back down to understanding. And a lot of that understanding is locked in that CRM, and that CRM allows it to cross employees, to your point, or roles or or even systems.
Yeah. Now, you've worked in the belly of the beast, Charles Schwab, obviously big company, and some of the other businesses that you've dealt with. You've also worked through some very interesting times in business. The migration from sort of Excel spreadsheets to and more one-on-one engagement and telephone calls to digitalization of businesses. Maybe talk to me about how stressful that was, or what you were doing during that period in terms of helping Charles Schwab digitalize their business or move their marketing and communications online.
So I got to Schwab through a startup. I was the 19th employee at a trading firm. We blew up in terms of good things. We grew like crazy. We had some really good tech, and our growth, because I was in the center of that, was through the digital channels, filling out online apps. We were for a while the longest standing advertiser on MarketWatch, which was a CBS product all around the market. We created innovative programs with Yahoo Finance when they were the 800-pound gorilla. And so we grew that startup through digital channels. Well, then Schwab shows up and they buy us, and they've got 350 at that time branches across the U.S., and it's a lot of belly-to-belly handshake business, a lot of old-school TV commercials, right? And so they started to us. What's working? What's not working? How do you track this? What would scale into our business? And so there's a lot of best practices shared. A lot of that went back to how are we measuring? What are we seeing? What are the systems telling us? And so a lot of early knowledge sharing, but I love the digital footprint. I love the digital space because of the measurement, because of the accuracy, because of the funnel, because of what we talked about, the CRM, and knowing what's working, what's not working, what levers you can pull. And so that was a lot of the best practices that we took to Schwab.
Now, we've both seen quite a lot of change in the digital landscape since we started. I'm sure you were working before there was Facebook ads and things like that. I remember having to do research on students and teens and so on before the advent of Instagram. So a lot of these new channels have cropped up. And your business obviously is a full-service digital agency. What are some of the new channels that you are promoting to your clients, and which ones do you think are going to maintain their relevance going forward? It's a big question, but yeah,
it is a big question. So I know that the world is changing, but right now, a lot of things start with Google, right? And so we spend a lot of time with our individual clients at the local level, helping make sure that when someone goes to Google, advisor near me, they show up. Are they in the map pack, right? Are they on the first page? If they are searching for a problem, do they have a solution that's in their blog or on their site somewhere? And so is their Google My Business and their services and all that, is it set up properly? And so today we consider that foundational. Let's get the site ready. Let's make sure that it's showing up on Google both technically as well as aesthetically, and then we build from there. And that's likened to the foundation of building a house. I feel like those properties are the foundation. We need their social presence to be right, and which social presence depends on who their target is, right? If they're going after professionals, we'll start at LinkedIn. If they're working toward retired folks, we might start on Facebook. Rarely do we do much on TikTok today. I'm sure that's coming. But the next layer of these digital platforms, we move into social. And we're not talking about spending money, but what we're talking about is being relevant. We're talking about being accurate. We're talking about being active. And then from there, it really just depends on that target and that brand, which direction we go, and are we talking about spending money? And if so, where are we talking about it? But we definitely like to start with your Google level and then your social level to make sure that those are rock solid and that we can build off of those platforms.
Yeah, I like that you call it foundational channels. And it's quite funny. When I started out, when I did my marketing degree, they spoke about traditional media, which was television, radio, etc., and then new media. And now Facebook, Instagram, all of these are traditional media, and all of these things like the metaverse and all of these other weird channels are sort of the new tech. So it's such a fast-moving environment. But I suppose the folks who are buying the products that your clients are selling are still in the modern traditional channels like your Facebooks, your Instagrams, LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, how useful is that in terms of building personal brands as a strategy for your clients?
So first of all, you had a podcast a few weeks ago on personal brands. I thought that was awesome. I loved a lot of what came out in that. And even as a marketer, I felt like I learned something. So before I go way too deep in personal brands, it feels like you've got some really good material already out there. But to answer your question, I will say that they are important. I think that we're not going to, in the financial services world, we're clear on what we sell, which is financial advice and helping people grow their money and help them reach their goals. And a lot of personal branding is about like building your persona and what you stand for. And so I think that in the financial services world, especially if you're talking about an advisor, it needs to be about credibility, right? And do I show up on their social profiles? Do I show up on their personal brand pages and see myself working with them, see them delivering the services that I need? Do our values align? And I think that can be a tricky one, but people tend to want to work with people, especially within their money, where their values align. And so I do think it's important there. It is easier for our clients, like I said, because we already know what we're selling, and it's easy to monetize that personal brand into financial advice and financial products.
Your business specializes in financial services and helping folks who sell that. Have you had other clients from other industries come to you and say, hey, I'd like to take a little bit of that secret sauce and use it in my business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've done work for engineering firms. We've done work for AI firms recently, and a lot of it translates over. What I find is that each industry has their own language, and when we're playing in the financial services world, we don't have to learn on the client's dime. We can hit the ground running. We know what we're talking about, and we can immediately start adding value. And one of the things that I don't want to happen is that we're not effective as a marketing organization. And so that's why we stay in financial services, because we can hit the ground and start adding value immediately. But I do think it translates. And like I said, we have had other clients that might not have been, their industries either are new and they need help starting out, or they're actually really old and they're trying to adapt new things. And so we will play outside our lines, but we try to stay where we know we can add value very quickly.
I love that you talk about learning the language of the client. And this is why it's important for entrepreneurs and people starting out to focus on a lane or stick in a lane and not try and be all things to all people. I mean, with your skills, you could go into 20 other different verticals, but like you said, you'd have to learn how do they speak, what are the customers like, what are the challenges in this industry, and that takes a lifetime of work. Basically, that takes a career, of work. And I tell my clients, if somebody comes from out of industry, I say I don't have 20 consultants who are specialized in each, in space travel. We'll have to find that person, but our foundational skills are what we're going to bring to the party, and then we bring in subject matter experts. So, to your point, very important to know your lane and probably to stick in that lane if you're going to grow your business and get known for something.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend all day talking about branding, right? And to me, a lot of branding is who's your target and what do you stand for and what pain point do you help them solve, right? And so my brand is financial services. Our brand is financial services because we can speak the language, because we bring credibility, because we bring experience. I will tell you, it also helps close rates, right? When I'm having a conversation with someone in financial services, their likelihood to work with me is 10 times better than when I'm talking to someone in an industry that I'm not an expert. And so I think it works both ways.
Absolutely. I used to work at Wunderbrand, and Wunderbrand had a healthcare business, and it had a business doing naming and a business doing valuation. So they separated those out. To your point, to help close that sale, being a specialist, and the client knows that, okay, these guys might be good, but do they have any expertise in my industry? Do they know the people that I know? Are they going to be able to use backroom channels to go and get additional information that is going to be able to help me? And that you can't do if you're trying to be everything to everyone. Talking branding, I have to send people to your website because it's so cool. It's one of the cooler websites I've had a look at. Very simple, very clean, and I love some of the imagery that you put in there. So you must have put a bit of money and time and thinking into your own brand as well.
Well, so, I mean, financial services isn't the sexiest industry, right? And so how do we have fun as marketers? Fortunately, we have a wonderful creative director who's just brilliant. And so what we did was we leaned into the Amplify side, right? And the first version of the website had concert crowds and, aerial pictures and stuff of real pictures. And we're in Austin, right? Live music capital of the world. So it was really easy for our brand to have a music theme because we're music junkies. We played around with replacing all of our pictures with our favorite artist, right? Just fun stuff like that. This version of the site, we actually used one of our very talented designers to do custom line art. We leaned into amplifiers and subwoofers and equalizers, just really to have some fun visual appeal, to have a brand that we want to be part of. And then the other side of that is it translates into much better swag. We started to make concert T-shirts and fun stuff for the employees and our clients because we could have fun with it. And so, yeah, we love the site. We've got more ideas for what to do. We're thinking about doing an annual concert T-shirt. Like, we are financial services. We like to have fun too.
Yeah, and it comes across in your website. Now, as I mentioned to folks, you've worked at one of the large, financial services companies in the States, dealing with hundreds of thousands of customers and people. But with that comes big infrastructure, HR managers, sales forces, drivers, canteens, etc. And that's great. Moving over into being an entrepreneur, is it what you expected? Has it been an easy ride? Can you tell me about what prompted you to start your own business when you've got this great track record in working at Charles Schwab and companies like that?
Ultimately, my favorite job I ever had was at the startup that I was at that Schwab bought. And the reason was the founder was, he cared about the employees. He made it a place that you wanted to get up and go to work. And so after we sold, I loved Schwab and I think the world of them as a firm, but I always knew that I wanted to create a place that had that feeling, that you wanted to get up and go to work. You felt excited about what you were doing. Unfortunately, we have to work, right? We got to provide for our families. We don't get to spend 10 hours a day with our family, so we spend it with our coworkers. And so how do we create this environment where people want to get up, they want to go to work, they feel like they're further in their career, they feel like they're doing something that's meaningful. And the only way to do that ultimately was to create our own agency. And so we take the employees' careers very seriously, but we also, as I just mentioned, like to have fun. But it was hard. And to steal from physics, right? An object at rest is going to stay at rest, and an object in motion is going to stay in motion. A big brand is in motion. That thing is picking up inertia and clients on its own. To start a new company, to start a new brand is hard work. You got to get that ball rolling. So they're definitely contrasts, but I think that helps us to serve our clients that are starting out because we've been in those seats. We understand what works. We understand also what doesn't work when you're a brand new brand, and so we can blend that expertise.
I suppose you also know that single-minded focus on getting clients and getting that cash register ticking over as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. There's been plenty of sleepless nights when you're starting out, but fortunately now we're growing. Clients are coming back, which is awesome to have somebody call you back and say, hey, I got another problem. You guys got time to deal with me? I love that conversation because that means we did a good job the first time, which is what I want to be doing. But yeah, I've definitely had those sleepless nights when you're starting something out.
Yeah. Being based in Texas, and I'm not exactly sure of how the system works in the States, but Texas is a big enough market for you, right? Or you're looking at doing work across the States?
We work nationally, U.S.-based clients in the financial services space. Now, if we're dealing with a localized advisor, their footprint usually is relatively contained, but we do work with fintech brands, too, that are trying to break into the national scene. Different set of tactics. But no, definitely the agency has clients and employees at this point all across the nation.
So would it make sense for international companies with a fintech product or a financial services product to get in touch with somebody like you as opposed to a Deloitte or one of these big guys and say, hey, how would we as a fintech brand or a new brand or a crypto brand break into the U.S. market?
Yes, if their target is U.S. market, I actually would love that challenge. One afternoon, I had a little bit extra time, and I wandered around on the web looking at banks in Africa to try to see if any of them weren't in the U.S., because I was just curious of which ones were and how they were doing it, because I just don't know anything about Africa. But I know that this is a big market, and there's a lot of immigrants here from Africa, and I was thinking, man, wouldn't that be cool to be able to be serviced by a bank from your home country? Or maybe it wouldn't, I don't know. But I love the idea of helping an international brand break into the U.S., because I think each market is unique, and we've been in it long enough that I think we know how to do it.
Well, if you ever want to talk African banking and African finance, I'm your guy. That's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. And my biggest client is the second largest bank in Africa. And we do all of their sustainability communications across Africa, which is quite fun. And yeah, the African diaspora in the States is pretty big. And I'm sure they probably are in the States. But and maybe I can put them in touch with you. We can discuss commissions afterwards.
It would be, yeah, absolutely. It would be a fun conversation. I'm a lifetime learner, so I would just enjoy the conversation.
Yeah. How can folks learn a little bit more about Trey and a little bit more about Story Amplify, your business?
So 100% the website, storyamplify.com. I mean, we, as marketers, we wanted to make it easy, right? So the name is the website. I've got a bio on there. You can reach out to me directly. We can talk stories about marketing. We can talk about financial services. We can talk about Texas football, whatever people want to cover.
I just want to ask one last thing. Have you ever been to a Kill Tony show?
I have not. This was the conversation of the weekend, this small world. I've not been to a Kill Tony show. I was watching last week's on Monday, but a friend of mine got tickets, and now I think I have a way to work an angle. I've got an idea, so we're getting ready to test it. Now, before we get off that subject, I don't want to be at the mic. I might put my name in the hat versus being the audience. We'll see, but I definitely want to try it.
Oh, you've got to be prepared up there, otherwise you're going to be roasted. Unless, I mean, the last week's one was hilarious, where it had, I can't remember the chap's name though, but it had both Trump and Joe Biden. It was one of the funniest things I've seen in my entire life, and I've listened and watched almost every single episode. So if I ever come to Austin, I'm going to hit you up. Let's get tickets and we can do some stand-up.
But yeah, absolutely.
Trey, thank you so much for joining us today. We could really go into much more detail on a whole bunch of these things, but this is really a get-to-know-you session, and hopefully we can get you on the show again and we can deep dive into some more growth strategies.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you so much for having me.